There is so much going on in the soil. We have no idea still. With all these complexities, people are now beginning to stand back, explore it further and try and spend time with it. But of course, there's no silver bullet and it is very complicated. And we do want to take control and we want to resolve things quickly. But that, as we've shown, by going too quickly from Second World War to where we are now, with our soils sick and ourselves sick, and then obviously hugely importantly the biodiversity crisis, we need to take control now, and sadly we need to look at how we're farming. It is this awful perpetual cycle, so we're just killing, destroying, trying to feed, trying to control. We're getting sick, things like cancer, long-term illnesses, they are all being sent back to the way we farm, etc. But our soil is sick, and if our soil is sick we can't farm it anymore. So that is one of our biggest asks, is to reconnect back to the people who are multifaceted, unbelievable people that work on our land to produce food for us every day. So I'm Claire Mackenzie. I am the producer on the documentary, which is about to go live at the start of 2024. The reason I've done it is because I'm a passionate environmentalist. Now, particularly being a mum, it really concerns me, it makes me anxious that I can't just watch it happen. So I like to work with projects that are looking at probably some hopeful, positive solutions, or at least ways of coping with living in this ever-changing climate. To me, because I live in Cambridgeshire, it's on my doorstep is very intensive arable farming, being the breadbasket of Britain, really, in East Anglia. I'd never lived like that before. Where I was brought up was hills and sheep. So I wanted to explore what was going on my doorstep. And on that journey, I met Colin, who's the director, because I wanted to make a film about it. So that's where it started. We saw the importance of it. And then Colin and I have built a team of amazing people who've really come to us because they're as passionate about soil as we are. But it's all about people for me, and it's bringing them together and it's sharing beautiful stories. And that's where we've got to with making this film.
I love that you're making it such a clear demonstration, a clear feeling that there's something about bringing life back to the land that brings life back to people and to community and hope, and very uplifting. And I don't think that we should knock that. It's a very powerful thing. I heard about the film, I think, a couple of years ago, so maybe a year into your journey, and it was starting to be promoted and having a few kind of words here and there. And I knew immediately that it's got such a significant message, this 6 inches of soil focusing right there. It would be wonderful if you could offer us a bit of context for the audience, if some of these things are new to them, to just summarise for us why the way that we farm is so important and so critical to the health of our soils.
Predominantly very much in the Western world, but really throughout the world, you're seeing a lot of extractive chemical farming. This is very man-made, and as we highlight in the film, it's utterly amazing how much food we're producing, and it's been incredible since the Second World War to stop people being hungry. But it's sadly now everyone's looking at it saying, well, what have we done to our soils, and how long have we got left to be able to use them and farm with them? Obviously, the Dust Bowl was a massive thing in America, and that was the 1930s. You're seeing that there's more dust emerging now, and people are having to really embrace different ways of farming. So in Britain, it's what we have explored is trying to step back, because some people will say, well, we're not the US. What they're doing doesn't mean anything to us. Our soils are fine. It's a temperate climate. It's fairly resilient. But when you get into the minutiae detail and go into microbial life that's in the soil, it is what we're finding is that with heavy tillage and heavy ploughing, that is being destroyed. On top of that, taking control are diseases or a rise in insects that we feel are pests, we have developed chemicals, etc., to control. So we're all trying to control, and we're doing it alongside big agrochemical companies. And it's all got into this crazy state where we've got, with our control, we've seen more pests arise. So therefore we need to have more chemicals. Not only that, they then need to develop a seed that's then resilient to the chemicals. And so it's this awful perpetual cycle. So we're just killing, destroying, trying to feed, trying to control. We can't do that anymore because we're getting sick. So let's just go for the human, things like cancer, long-term illnesses, they are all being sent back to the way we farm, etc. But our soil is sick, and if our soil is sick, we can't farm it anymore. You want to have healthy soils that are also remaining in fields, remaining on gardens, remaining on the land, not running into our rivers. At the moment, they're running into our rivers, so we're now getting polluted water. There are obviously chemicals within that, and we have a huge issue there because that's an every cyclical issue. It's all one system. There is no separation here. What they're doing at the moment is a lot of research being done on the nutritional density of food. We hopefully one day will be able to fire a machine at a piece of food and it be able to read it. We have at the moment bricks testing, which looks at sugar testing, and then there's some other really wonderful things coming, particularly from America over here as well, where they're looking at all of that, but it's still being worked on to produce the right data and scientific exploration. If we are not maximising the nutritional density when it is grown in healthy soil, we're not going to be having those wonderful benefits to try and prevent some of the awful diseases. There is so much going on in the soil. We have no idea still where we know a tiny amount about the billions of organisms, but it's not just what lives there, it's their relationship. We are only unearthing all of that. Excuse terrible puns that always come out with this subject, but with all these complexities, people are now beginning to stand back, explore it further and try and spend time with it. But of course, there's no silver bullet and it is very complicated. And we do want to take control and we want to resolve things quickly. But that, as we've shown, by going too quickly from Second World War to where we are now with our soils sick and ourselves sick, and then obviously hugely importantly the biodiversity crisis, we need to take control now and sadly we need to look at how we're farming.
So it seems that whilst we've become very successful at farming to produce huge volumes of food, the intensification and our reliance upon inputting chemicals has had a knock-on effect. There's now a firm awareness that these approaches have actually put many natural functions that we depend upon into decline. Nature doesn't need fossil fuels to grow food or control pests. But it does require an abundance of relationships between a diversity of creatures to keep building blocks in motion and everything in balance. And then there's our own health. This aspect that if we grow food without all of those natural relationships intact, then the output can contain much less nutrition. It makes you stop and take a look at the food on our plates. These daily choices have so much impact. And the difference between good food and bad food is probably not as clear-cut as we thought. But if good food comes from good practices for the soil, is there even enough of it available for us? The clear answer is no. Does all of this mean that we're leaving farmers to be the drivers for change? The film, I think, describes itself along the lines of a story of British farmers standing up against the industrial food system. Do you feel that it is the farmers that are being left to move things forward?
The farmers who have looked into their crystal ball or who have got the capacity to, because this is really complex and you can't point a finger at farmers and say, you're not doing it, you're a bad farmer. That isn't what we're saying in the film at all. What we're saying is those that are leading on it, whether that could be financially they're secure enough to make that decision, whether they have the headspace to explore a totally different way of farming, going away from chemical to biological, working with nature. But what's happening is they to get everybody else to transition, they need support. So they need more people on the ground, agronomists, there are a handful of them who really do understand this. There are different people, whether it's the private sector who are putting money into this, and there's new companies starting in carbon credits, and it's all really, really complex. But at the end of it, you have to look to the farmer to guide people, because they are the ones who know the system, the land, etc. But it is very complex, because each farm, each field, each year is different. And so you need to have different voices, different people from different bits of the country coming together and coming together to lead on it. And that's what you do see at somewhere like Groundswell. And it is amazing, and they are doing it, and they are leading on it.
I really get the sense that the motivation for change, it has to come from people, and it has to come from story. It's not going to come necessarily from logic and statistics and figures. It's going to come from that human connection. Do you feel that coming through in the film?
I hope so. I think it's the other thing that struck us so much. So if you go back to David White and his worms, and some of the other earlier farmers, like Martin Lyons particularly, who heads up Nature Friendly Farming Network, when they describe how they farmed earlier in their lives, more relying on putting in inputs onto their land, you see that sense of reconnection with farming. And Martin, I went to his farm recently, it's near here in Cambridgeshire, and wow, I mean, the man is a force, tour de force. I don't know if he actually ever sleeps. He was doing studies on it, and the organic matter was coming up, and some more life in the soil. Woodlands were buzzing. The birds, he's potty for birds. There were the meadows, and then there were flower strips. So he is doing this incredible thing where he's done all this research. So he's got, a big Cambridgeshire field, and not just having the margins down the side, he's going in the middle as well, because then you've got positive, as they call them, beneficiaries, which is a rather clunky word for a beautiful little insect like a ladybird that can help go into the fields and consume the aphids and do the jobs without him having to use insecticides. But he's definitely been, even though he works so hard and he's down in government lobbying, etc., he's definitely been regenerated. You can kind of feel it in himself. So when you see that, and the same with David White, when you see him smell his soil, touch his soil, talk about the cover crops, look at the wild diversity he's got on his farm, and he does all these really beautiful posts on Twitter and stuff, you get that innate sense of regeneration. With our younger farmers in the film, one of them has gone back to the family farm. So she is seeing her father regenerate himself. And it is very beautiful. And she makes very, very poignant comments about that. And so all of those examples are really beautiful. So that for me.
I notice also through the stories that you represent, they're very diverse in the type of farm that they have. And I'm assuming that that was deliberate in what you're representing. But does it teach you anything about what regenerative farming looks like, or what it doesn't look like, and what it can encompass?
Yeah, we did it very deliberately, because we have, obviously we're a small island, but we have lots of different farming communities and different climatic influences. So on the west, it's wetter and you get more of the grazing. On the east, as I've said before, we're much more arable and vegetables. At the moment, environmentally, we're being presented that we should eat less meat or go completely plant-based. We have animals in the film, and Ben is a livestock farmer. He has always been a livestock farmer. His dad has farmed cows in Cornwall. His family have been cattle farmers for years. And he is now farming differently from his dad and previous generations. What we try and explore with that trying to oversimplify it, is that these ruminants can play a very, very key role on the land to regenerate the soil and also the biodiversity in his woodlands, etc. So that was sort of a livestock conversation. There is a livestock conversation also when you go to Lincolnshire, because Anna and Andrew, essentially arable farmers, and they brought in sheep to help with the regeneration. So they're fertilizers. They call them the golden hooves. They're helping turn up the land, and they are moving them around. And then we've got Adrienne nearer us in Cambridgeshire. It's almost peri-urban because Cambridge is really, really close by. So again, you kind of got that angle. She's exploring different routes to market. And there's lots of studies showing that if we had more of these smaller growers growing closer to populations and producing veg that isn't traveled very far and is fresher and having other people working on the land, hopefully not few people feeling we're going backwards, but actually providing people with this wonderful food, but with control of it and not completely annihilating the land as it's being grown. It's been a scarily complex subject, which is probably why it's there aren't a lot of these films out there. So what we ended up doing with the film is there are subjects presented throughout. And what we invite people to do is what we call dig deeper. Now, on our website, we are developing at the moment. It's still quite basic. And we're still fundraising if people want to be involved in this, to develop this further, that we've got these topics. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have worked with, now 12 NGOs, but partners who basically helped us with research guidance and fact finding, etc. There's so many of them doing amazing things. We're trying to signpost people to those. Having watched the film, you can then go, I'd like to dig into these subjects a bit further, whether it's soil, climate, farming, food. And so on there, you can then go, I'm a farmer. I'd like to know more. What do I do next? I could become a member of Nature Friendly Farming Worker. I'd quite like to do what Ben's doing with the cows, but I don't know where to start. So we're kind of signposting. One of the biggest things for me is to get this film seen and discuss outside of our echo chamber. What we are doing with it is doing screenings and then eventizing it. So you see the film and then there's a panel session. It will eventually go online, but immediately we want it to be a film that generates discussion.
You can find a link to the 6 Inches of Soil website in the description. Head over there to dig in deeper. And there's more videos like this on the way from We Are Carbon. So do subscribe here so you can keep up to date.